In 1980, 3 Texans confronted a UFO swarmed by military helicopters. Radiation burns left them suing the U.S. government for millions. Officials denied everything, but the evidence? Wild as hell. This is the Vickie Landrum UFO incident. I'm Uncle Perry, and around here, I don't just tell stories. I dig up the fucked up ones most folks are too chicken shit to talk about. From UFOs and aliens, to cryptids and government secrets, I chase down the truth behind the legends. If you're ready to question reality and explore the twisted, you're in the right place. Let's get it! On the evening of December 29, 1980, Betty Cash, Vickie Landrum, and Vickie's 7-year-old grandson Colby set out in Betty's Oldsmobile Cutlass for their regular Monday night bingo game. To their disappointment, all the games had been canceled for the holidays. So instead, they stopped for a meal at a roadside restaurant in New Caney. Betty, 51, was a successful businesswoman who owned a restaurant and a grocery store. Vickie, 57, worked for Betty at the restaurant and sometimes as a school meals assistant. 7-year-old Colby lived with his grandmother. After dinner, they headed home along Highway FM 1485, a quiet 2-lane road winding through the dark pine forests of East Texas. Though just 30 miles from Houston, the area was sparsely populated, dotted with oak groves, swamps, and lakes. About 30 minutes into their drive, Colby noticed a bright light hovering above. He pointed it out, but at first, Vickie assumed it was just a jet flying unusually low. As the light grew larger and closer, however, it became clear this was no goddamn plane. The object descended toward the road ahead and soon blocked their path. Betty later recalled, then at the bottom, flames were shooting out. The heat was tremendous. It just felt like I was burning from the inside out. I was horrified. The only thing I was thinking was, are we going to get out of here alive? A terrified Vickie believed she was witnessing the start of the apocalypse. To comfort Colby, she told him, "Don't be afraid. If you see a man, it'll be Jesus. He's coming to carry us to a better place." According to the witnesses, the object was fucking massive, roughly the size of a water tower, and shaped like a glowing, upright diamond with its top and bottom cut flat. The surface looked like dull aluminum or gray metal with blunt edges. Blue lights flashed around the middle, and it gave off a flammable odor like lighter fluid. Blue flames periodically erupted from its underside, blasting out into a wide cone before the craft sank downward and then rose again. It emitted an odd mix of sounds, a roaring like a flamethrower, high-pitched beeps, and a strange whooshing. The heat was so intense it lit up the surrounding forest like it was the middle of the fucking day. Vickie screamed, "Stop the car or we'll be burned alive!" Becky brought the Cutlass to a halt about 195 feet from the object. Vickie and Betty got out of the car and Colby stayed in the car. Betty walked toward the front of the vehicle and stared up at the UFO despite the searing heat on her skin. Colby begged his grandmother to get back inside, and after a few minutes she did, pulling him close. Betty finally rejoined them, but only after heat from the craft had forced her back. When she touched the car door, it was so hot she had to use her leather jacket to protect her hands. Just as suddenly as it appeared, the object began to rise. Its strange noises replaced by the thunder of rotor blades. A lot of them. The witnesses counted 23 helicopters swarming in from all directions, mostly CH-47 Chinooks with their double rotors, along with several fast single-rotor models, likely Bell Hueys. The choppers surrounded the UFO in tight formation as it climbed above the treetops. Betty had been trying to start the car, but with no luck. Finally, after the UFO moved far enough away, the car roared to life. The group hauled ass out of there, catching glimpses of the glowing craft and its helicopter escort through breaks in the trees. At one point, from a better vantage along a larger highway, they could clearly see the UFO still blazing in the distance, with choppers circling erratically around it. The chase continued a couple more miles until the craft eventually disappeared. From first sighting to departure, the close encounter of the second kind lasted about 20 minutes. Betty dropped Vickie and Colby off at their home in Dayton, then went home alone, freaked the fuck out, and severely burned from the ordeal. Unlike most UFO sightings, the sighting itself wasn't as fucked up as what happened after the encounter. That night, the three of them thought the worst was over once they made it home. Turns out, shit was just getting started. Within 6 hours, all three were sick as hell. Nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and their eyes burning. Betty, who had been outside the longest staring at that damn UFO, got it the worst. By midnight, her skin had turned bright red like a brutal sunburn. Her neck swelled. Blisters started erupting across her face, scalp, and eyelids, and she couldn't stop throwing up. By morning, she was nearly in a fucking coma. Vickie and little Colby weren't spared either. They both got the same symptoms, just not as severe. Still, it was a miserable night all around. The next morning, Becky moved into Vickie's house so they could care for her. But her condition tanked fast. 3 days later, she ended up in Houston's Parkway Hospital. Her burns and swelling were so bad that friends didn't even recognize her. Her hair was falling out in clumps. Her face was swollen shut for a week, and blisters the size of golf balls bubbled up across her head and neck. Nurses who saw her thought she was a burn victim. She spent nearly a month in the hospital, went home barely improved, then had to go back for another 15 days. In the following year, she'd be hospitalized 5 more times, twice in intensive care. She couldn't tolerate any kind of sunshine, hot water, or even normal heat anymore. Her skin would break out in eruptions the size of coins that left scars. Over time, she developed breast cancer, something she had no history of in her family. Her doctor, Brian McClelland, was convinced she'd been hit with a burst of ionizing radiation. He estimated she'd taken a dose between 1 and 2 grays. Not instantly lethal, but more than enough to fuck you up. He treated Betty for free for the last 18 years of her life, and she trusted him completely. But he couldn't get all of her medical records from Parkway Hospital. Despite sending 30 release requests, the files never showed up. He figured someone blocked them, probably at a military level. Vickie and Colby had it rough too, just on a smaller scale. Both had recurring skin problems and eye issues. Vickie's eyesight tanked after the encounter. She had to keep getting new glasses as her vision was quickly turning to shit, and she worried she'd eventually go blind. Colby needed glasses too, but wasn't hit as hard. Both of them lost hair. Colby just a patch on his crown, Vickie about 30% of hers. Both grew back, except it was coarse and different. In 1981, Vickie developed a cataract in one eye. By 1983, Betty was being treated for breast cancer. Neither had those conditions beforehand. Even decades later, their health problems never fully went away. Whatever the hell they ran into that night, whether UFO, secret tech, or some other shit, it left a permanent mark on their bodies. If there was one thing that pissed them off as much as the burns, it was how goddamn slippery the official story turned out to be. The helicopters were the big wild card. Twin-rotor Chinooks showing up like something out of a war movie. But figuring out who the fuck sent them was a nightmare. Houston airport people tried to help, but their answers only made things more twisted. They said roughly 350 to 400 helicopters operate around Houston commercially, but they're all single-rotor birds, no CH-47s. And since helicopters fly VFR, visual flight rules, they don't always have to check in with tower control. So there was no flight plan paper trail to pull. On top of that, Houston's control radar around Huffman was a piece of shit. It can't reliably detect anything below 1,700 feet, while helicopters operating outside a 15-mile radius of the airport are supposed to stay below 1,800 feet. To say there were blind spots was a huge understatement. The Army's side was just as sus. Major Tony Geishauser from Fort Hood told a newspaper he knew of no Fort Hood aircraft in the Houston area that night. He blew it off as probably a super secret thing, which is official speak for I know, but I'm not allowed to say. Every other base in Texas and Louisiana denied responsibility too. No branch would fucking own up to sending 23 choppers over the Piney Woods. Becky and Vickie knocked on a lot of doors. Air Force, NASA, other federal offices, you name it. The Air Force's Office of the Inspector General eventually looked into the claims and flat out said they couldn't find any record of a military operation that matched what the witnesses described. Officials also maintained that the kind of radiation symptoms the women showed didn't line up with any known U.S. aircraft or weapon system. Bottom line, they got denials, and more denials. No answers, no medical payouts, no accountability. Investigators kept focusing on the helicopters and were gaslighted every time. The presence of Chinooks made the witnesses assume the military had seen the object too. Maybe escorting it, maybe chasing it. But every official channel came back with more bullshit. No paper trail, no unit claim, no explanation. Years later, the sense that somebody was quietly watching them didn't go away. In a 2013 interview, Colby said people kept showing up at their house to test them for radiation. Sometimes officials, sometimes people who wouldn't identify themselves. He remembered being warned that someone might one day scoop him up and take him away. That's pretty fucked up. That kind of contact, the tests, and the disappearing records only made the whole thing feel more like someone was trying to scrub the story. So yeah, they got helicopters, heat, burns, scary-ass medical fallout, and an official shrug. The more they tried to find out who was involved, the more the trail petered out into silence. That silence is part of why people still whisper that the government covered something up that night. You think? Turns out the Cash Landrum crew weren't the only ones who saw something strange that night. Oh, fuck no. In May 1982, investigators sat down with Dayton police officer Lamar Walker and his wife Marie. They swore they'd seen about a dozen Chinook helicopters flying low in the exact same area on the exact same night. Coincidence? Ha! Not likely. Over time, more and more names surfaced. Betty's own doctor, Brian McClellan, told the Houston Post in 1991 that her condition was a textbook case of radiation poisoning. He said that it was as if she'd been 3 to 5 miles from Hiroshima when the bomb dropped. That's about as blunt as a physician can get. NASA even got pulled into it. When Vickie called looking for answers, she got shuffled toward engineer John Schuessler, a dude with a long-standing interest in UFOs. At first, he was skeptical, but once he looped in his MUFON contacts, he started digging. Schuessler eventually connected with other witnesses. Officer Walker again, who later said that the choppers had their ground lights on and were definitely looking for something. Plus Jerry McDonald, an oilfield worker who saw a blazing object cross the sky just minutes before the Cash Landrum sighting. And it didn't stop there. An off-duty cop, his wife, another laborer in Crosby, all claimed to have seen either the helicopters or the craft itself. Their difference? They stayed in their cars, didn't get out, and avoided the radiation burns. To back up her own memories, Vickie even underwent hypnotic regression under Dr. Leo Sprinkle from the University of Wyoming. Oh, I'm sure he didn't get teased in high school. Sprinkle walked away convinced, flat out saying the craft had been under intelligent control. With all these accounts piling up, one thing became crystal fucking clear. Betty, Vickie, and Colby weren't just spinning a tall Texas tale. There was a pattern here, and it had way more witnesses than the government was willing to admit. For 7-year-old Colby, the helicopters became monsters in the sky. Months after the encounter, when a CH-47 flew into Dayton for a public exhibition, the kid started losing his shit. Vickie tried to calm him down by taking him to see the Chinook up close. Maybe if he saw it sitting on the tarmac, it would be less terrifying than watching it hover above the pines in the dark. At first, it worked. The crew even let folks climb aboard. But then, things got fucking weird. According to Vickie and other witnesses, the pilot casually mentioned he'd been in the area months earlier checking on a UFO in trouble near Huffman. When Vickie told him she was one of the people burned that night by the UFO, he immediately clammed up and had them escorted off the chopper. Investigators later tracked down the pilot, Chief Warrant Officer 3 Culberson, who admitted he knew about the Cash Landrum case. But when pressed about his involvement, he said he couldn't go into details because of national security. Translation: he knew a lot more than he was allowed to say. Schuessler, doing his own legwork, visited the original site 7 weeks after the event. He found a scorched patch of pavement right where the women said the UFO had hovered. Days later, that section of road was mysteriously repaved. If that's not a fucking cover-up, then your sister really did teach aliens how to twerk. And to cap it off, members of Schuessler's visit organization found yet another pilot willing to talk, anonymously, of course. He admitted awareness of the incident and the trio's injuries, but offered little else. Just one more breadcrumb in the trail that the government tried to sweep away. By 1982, Betty Cash and the Landrums had had enough of the fucking bullshit. The physical issues were not going away. So they did what most folks would do when every official door slams in their face. They said, fuck it, and sued the U.S. government for $20 million in damages. The argument was simple. The military was either directly responsible for their injuries or, at the very least, knew goddamn well what happened that night. Their lawyer pointed to the helicopters, the health problems, and the silence that followed as proof something shady was going on. The Air Force even dragged them down to Bergstrom Air Force Base near Austin for interviews. They gave depositions, retold the whole fucked up night, and were basically told, yeah, you'll want a civilian attorney for this. With that, the case formally hit the courts. But by 1986, it all collapsed. A U.S. District Court judge dismissed the suit for lack of evidence, leaning heavily on an internal investigation led by Lieutenant Colonel George Sarin. His report claimed no records showed CH-47s in the Houston area that night, no experimental craft in the arsenal, and no military involvement at all. Without hard evidence, the judge tossed it. The ruling left Betty and Vickie with no compensation, no answers, and the same gnawing suspicion. The government knew a fuck-ton more than it was admitting. Now, here's an interesting fact most folks overlook. The Cash Landrum sighting wasn't just some random outlier. It happened almost back-to-back with Great Britain's most famous UFO case, the Rendlesham Forest incident. On December 28, 1980, the night before Betty and Vickie's encounter, U.S. Air Force security personnel stationed at RAF Woodbridge in Suffolk, England, saw what looked like a burning aircraft descend into the woods. When they went in after it, they found a glowing, triangular craft hovering in a clearing. The scene left scars, snapped branches, scorch marks, indentations in the ground. Later, checks even showed spikes of radioactivity in the soil and scraped tree trunks. It wasn't just fucking lights in the sky. This was physical, traceable evidence. So think about that. 2 separate continents, 2 separate encounters, just 24 hours apart. One in the Texas piney woods, one in an English forest. Both leaving behind scorched earth and radiation. Coincidence? Or was something happening on a global scale that winter? I did a deep dive on the Rendlesham Forest incident. If you want to check it out, I'll leave a link in the distraction. After the burns, the helicopters, and the government denials, the real question remains. What exactly did Betty, Vickie, and Colby experience that night? All right, time to play devil's advocate. Not everyone's buying the UFO and secret helicopter story, and there are a few sensible and some less sensible explanations people keep coming back to. First up, the military/experimental aircraft idea. A lot of skeptics say what the witnesses saw could have been a malfunctioning classified military aircraft. That theory ticks a few boxes. Twin-rotor Chinooks were reported in the area. The craft looked weird enough to be non-standard, and secrecy around classified tests would explain the radio silence. In other words, maybe it wasn't aliens, just secret tech that went sideways when 3 civilians were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Then there are the more down-to-earth misidentifications and psychological explanations. Some say they simply mistook a conventional aircraft or atmospheric phenomenon for something exotic. Stress, night vision, and the brain's tendency to fill in gaps can make ordinary stuff look fucked up, especially when you're on a dark road at night. One specific and weird suggestion came from skeptic Stuart Campbell in 1994. He floated the idea that the witnesses might have seen a mirage of the star Canopus, which that night aligned with the road. Sounds out there, but it's the kind of claim skeptics like to use when bright lights and strange motion are involved. The lack of residual radiation is another big hole skeptics point to. The Texas Bureau of Radiation Control allegedly couldn't find residual radioactivity at the scene. Russ Meyer, a Houston public health manager, said that if there had been heavy radioactive contamination, some would still be left there. He admitted, though, that certain exposures to ultraviolet, infrared, or low-energy X-rays usually don't leave traceable residue. Other researchers note that high-energy ionizing bursts, the kind that hurt people, don't necessarily create lingering radioactivity in the environment. So a lack of radioactive soil isn't exactly a slam dunk argument. Finally, the harshest critics flat out call the whole thing a hoax, an elaborate bullshit story cooked up for attention, money, or fame. That's the nuclear option in skeptical circles. If any piece of evidence is even a little shaky, they say the whole narrative is fucked. So, yeah, between secret military tests, optical weirdness, normal aircraft, psychosocial effects, and the possibility of fabrication, there are plenty of non-alien explanations on the table. Now for the other side of the fence. The folks who think Betty, Vickie, and Colby weren't just seeing shit, but something truly unearthly. A lot of believers point straight to government involvement, the military helicopters circling the object, the Air Force's denials, and the sudden disappearance of official records all scream cover-up. To them, the incident isn't just about a UFO. It's proof that the government fucking knows more than it's letting on about unidentified aerial phenomena. Then there's the alien craft theory. Some think it was extraterrestrial, likely a ship that malfunctioned or even crashed. The bizarre lights, strange behavior in the sky, and the intense physical effects on the witnesses all fit the pattern folks point to. Something far beyond conventional aircraft or human tech. Even with civilian researchers, independent journalists, and UFO enthusiasts digging into the event, nothing concrete has ever emerged to explain it fully. But for believers, that only strengthens their resolve. Proof that the truth is out there, and the Vickie Landrum incident is a textbook example of it. The Vickie Landrum incident didn't just vanish with the UFO that night. It left a permanent mark on everyone involved. Betty, Vickie, and Colby endured physical injuries, ongoing health issues, and psychological trauma that lasted for years. A stark reminder of how real and life-altering a UFO encounter can really be. Even decades later, there's still no solid explanation for what happened over that Texas highway in 1980. The mystery endures, lingering in official records, witness accounts, and the memories of those who survived it. Betty Cash passed away on December 29, 1998, exactly 18 years to the day after the encounter. Vickie Landrum died on September 12, 2007. Colby Landrum, now 51, remains alive, carrying the psychological scar of that terrifying night and the unanswered questions it left behind. Are you a fan of weird-ass monsters, cryptids, aliens, or UFOs? Then tap that like button and subscribe. That way, you won't miss out on more of my fucked up commentary. And besides, I really do appreciate it. So, was it a cover-up? A UFO encounter? A bunch of bullshit? Or all of the above? Let me know down in the comments. And if you're ready to crank that shit all the way up to 11, that join button's got your name on it. For just $2.99, you can have my back in a huge way. Until next time, y'all keep it real, keep it chill, and stay creepy! Catch you on the flip. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. You are the real beast.